महादेव शम्भो शिव शङ्कर महादेव शम्भो शिव शङ्कर शरण आवत तुम्हारे अभयंकर शरण आवत तुम्हारे अभयंकर जय गिरिजापति दीन दयाल जय गिरिजापति दीन दयाल सदा
A very good evening to all of you. I, Vinti Kathuria, on behalf of Ehsaas Women of Agra and Prabha Kisan Foundation, would like to welcome you all for the Right Circle with author Shreyana Bhattacharya. Prabha Kisan Foundation is a social non-government organization and its activities are aimed towards the betterment in the arena of education, art, culture and women empowerment. The foundation has its presence not only pan-India but also countries overseas. Ehsaas is an initiative of Prabha Kisan Foundation. It is a conglomeration of women from all walks of life who contribute in their own way for the betterment of society. Ehsaas Women of Agra, in association with Dainik Jagran and ITC Mughal, present to you the Right Circle, which is also an initiative of Prabha Kisan Foundation, which brings readers close to the work and lives of acclaimed authors through a series of informal conversations. Today we have the distinct honor of welcoming a literary luminary whose words have woven tales of wonder and depth, captivating readers nationwide. Our featured author this evening is none other than Shreyana Bhattacharya. Hailing from New Delhi, Shreyana has established herself as a voice of extraordinary talent and insight in the literary world. Best-selling author of Desperately Seeking Shahrukh, India's lonely young woman in the search for intimacy and independence. The book was recently shortlisted for Sahitya Academy Award in 2023. She's trained at Hindu College and Harvard University. She's an economist at the World Bank and has won the Atta Galata BLF Book Prize for Best Non-Fiction for 2022 and the Times of India J.K. Paper Author Prize for Best Non-Fiction Author for 2022. Before we delve into the depths of Shreyana's mesmerizing storytelling, I must take a moment to appreciate the sheer brilliance of a book cover featuring the iconic Shah Rukh Khan. The moment I laid eyes on the cover, I was captivated. Just as Shah Rukh has captured the hearts of millions with his on-screen charisma, this book cover effortlessly grabs hold of your attention, inviting you into a world where every page holds a new adventure. Please join me in giving a warm and enthusiastic welcome to the brilliant Shreyana Bhattacharya. Our very own Ehsaas Woman of Agra, who is an author and a writer. She has worked as a freelance writer of a lifestyle magazine and undertook various writing projects. She is also actively engaged in social work and has volunteered with various NGOs. Her aim is to uncover the many layers of societal conditioning in order to promote tolerance and inclusivity. Over to you, Chandni.
Thank you so much, Ruby, for that very generous introduction. Thank you so much, Shanaya, for being with us. And thank you to all of you for taking up the time on a busy Sunday and being here in this conversation with all of us. And thank you, Vinti, for the cue about the cover, because I'm going to take from there. And not only the cover, Shanaya, Desperately Seeking Shahrukh is an unmissable title. I don't think so you can browse past that book in a bookstore if you ever come across a title that says Desperately Seeking Shahrukh. And when I first learned about the book, I must confess that I thought that it's going to be a book about Shah Rukh's fandom or probably a few moments of women fangirling about the star. But when I actually did my research on you, I realized that you're an economist. And so I thought that it's going to be primarily about economics and the economic condition of women in our society. And when I started reading the book, I realized that there's so much more. And it is such a layered subject that you've covered. So to begin with, what was your inspiration really behind the title? Like, how did you come across this creative title and think about using Shah Rukh as a creative device in binding the many women that you did?
Well, firstly, good evening everyone, and thanks everybody for joining. And let me echo the fact that this is a weekend and I'm really surprised that we have a packed house, and I think it's very much to everyone's efforts here in KF. I should start by saying that the story of this book, it's a work of non-fiction, so it's based on research. These are people's actual stories. It's based on 15 years of research. So in economics and in sociology, we call this longitudinal research. So what we tend to do is we follow, say, a household or a person or a family for a very long period of time. So we keep going back to them every year and we ask them questions about their welfare, their jobs, their circumstances. I decided, instead of asking people in the very typical way economists do about how much money are you making, tell us about your taxes, tell me hours you're working, I was just going to go ask 10 women who I followed for 15 years. Every year I would just go and ask them, did you watch your favorite actor's films? And the favorite actor in this case was Shah Rukh Khan. It just happens. It could be Carnatic music, it could have been football, it could have been Amitabh Bachchan, it could have been something different. It's just that I think for us the shared interest was Shah Rukh. And the way this started was in 2006 when the research of the book started. It was a complete accident. I was working at that time, this was my first job. I was in my mid-20s, just early 20s, mid-20s. I'd finished my master's in economics and I was helping. Many of you may know SEWA. SEWA is the world's largest labor union of women working in the informal economy. Started in Ahmedabad. I was based in Ahmedabad at that time. And I was supposed to help with a survey. And it was a very simple survey on women who were making garments and incense sticks at home, earning about a quarter of minimum wage. And this was in a neighborhood called Bapu Nagar within Ahmedabad. And I was just supposed to go and help ask questions. It was a very typical economics questionnaire, very boring. How many hours do you work? Tell me about your labor income, and so on. And you know, Jasmine, when I started asking all these women these questions, many of them, they just looked so bored because they turned to me, they used to call me Survey Wali Didi. And they used to say that we've seen all you Bengali girls with kajal in your eyes and the khadi kurta, and you know, like, this is such a cliche. And they said, could we please do something different? And you know, one of the things to remember about all these women is they were all unionists themselves. They were all part of SEWA. They really didn't need someone from the outside to come and help them. They were trying to help themselves. And so I realized that the traditional way of doing economics, right, the questionnaire, the very standard way, it just was not working in the field. And you know, there is a question of power here. It's always us people who are privileged with a lot of education, studying and asking people who don't have that kind of privilege, very intrusive questions about their lives. And so I realized this traditional way was not working. I had to do something different. And you know, in research, they teach you things like ice-breaking techniques. I've been using them on some of you right now when we were having coffee. And you know, you ask people what makes you laugh, what interests you. And I started asking all these women, so who's your favorite actor? Because मुझे politics के बारे में तो बात नहीं करनी थी, मुझे cricket के बारे में कोई आता नहीं, I'm not interested. And so one of the things that's common amongst many of us in our culture tends to be movies, right? So I started asking people who's your favorite actor. And it was really surprising, in one of the most low-income settlements in the country, I suddenly found all these Shah Rukh Khan fans, and I was always told that his fan base is a lot urban women, NRIs, very wealthy. But suddenly you realize that all these women who really were struggling, you know, to be economically independent, they just loved him. And I realized when I started asking these women about him, just the tone, the tenor, the energy of the conversation just shifted. Everybody now suddenly wanted to talk. Everybody now was sort of saying, you know, like, let me talk first, when you talk later, and so on. The energy shifted. And when I started making notes and I went back home and I looked at them, I realized none of these women, I think to your point, none of these women were talking about some silly celebrity crush. You know, this was not about them talking about Shah Rukh. If you actually started to listen to them, they were talking about how difficult it was for them to find money, to be able to watch their favorite actor, to find free time, to be able to watch their favorite actor, to have a mobile phone of their own. And you know, in economics we do this all the time. We measure what we call purchasing power, right? So if you want to buy a sari, can you buy it? Can you buy sugar? Can you buy rice? I just started asking all these women, can you buy tickets or access to your favorite movie star? And it becomes a very interesting way to get very, you know, regular people who are not familiar with economics to suddenly start to think about their own economic freedoms and their purchasing power without making it so boring and typical. So that was the genesis of the book. It started in 2006 in Ahmedabad. I used the same technique in the forest wherever I was sent for research. I would always ask people, who's your favorite actor? And invariably I would find some Shah Rukh Khan fans, and some of these women, we all agreed that we would be in touch. And so from the forests of Jharkhand, where I was interviewing migrant domestic workers, to UP, where there were home-based garment workers, and Ahmedabad, women who are in-flight attendants as well. It's a large group of women, 10 sets, that were then, for 15 years, I just kept asking them, what's going on with your economic freedom? And the way to answer the question was never, tell me about how much money you're making, but do you have the free time to watch Shah Rukh Khan? Do you have money to watch Shah Rukh Khan? And the answers are very depressing, as you can see in the book. We won't give it away, everyone has to read the book to know what happens. But it also became this very interesting way for me to pull in the data from economics on what's happened to women in the economy. Also talk a little bit about Shah Rukh Khan, who I love very much. But also talk about what's happened to women, the psychology, social health of women in our country. And all these women are so different in terms of faith, class, background, region. So I thought this would be a much more interesting and perhaps a more alive way, and a more joyous way of doing it, as opposed to the same, I go with my questionnaire and I'm boring people constantly by asking them these questions. And suddenly I realized the book is not about Mr. Khan. I say this actually in the first page of the book. The book is actually what he allows all these women to share about themselves. It's about their economic freedom, their personal freedoms, their romantic and personal aspirations. And he's just, I call him my research technique. He's the best research technique.
I think it's worked like a charm and how.
Thank you.
But also like 15 years of research, that's like a very long time. That's a mammoth of a period. So I'm assuming that in 15 years, the trajectory of each woman must have drastically transformed in some way or the other. And at any point, did any of them know that, this endeavor that you're at is going to probably culminate into their stories being immortalized into a book? And how open were they, how embracing were they of you? Any incident you remember and you'd like to run us through your journey of 15 years?
Yeah, so originally, so let's start with this. Almost all the women I met were through research projects. And research projects in India require ethical clearances. You can't just go and collect information about anybody and write it. You have to, there are very clear codes of conduct about recording the information, giving it back. There's, it's almost like a doctor-patient type, there are different kinds of ethical protocols here. You have to be very careful. And so it required for me actually to write everything down. Many of the women didn't read Hindi or didn't even read English. So, I always joke that I'm ready with the film style narration of the book because I had to go and narrate to them constantly what was being recorded. And that was, it was challenging because obviously when going back and doing this takes time. It had to be done, otherwise I would not be ethically cleared to actually write the book. It had to go through a review process. And I'm very grateful to many academics who taught me, who sort of helped me navigate that process. But the interesting thing that also happened was, so I did my first 4 sets of interviews. I thought, okay, this book would finish with 5 years of research, it would be over. And then when I went back, suddenly everyone's lives had become exactly to your point, suddenly so much more interesting. One person, I will not give it away, one person just disappeared, she ran away from her husband. And you have to read the book to know what happened, where she was and what happened. And I played some tiny role in figuring out what was happening in her life and bringing her eventually back home. But so everyone's lives became so interesting. So because of the ethics process, I had to go back. And then suddenly people's lives have become even more interesting. And so I decided to continue for another 5 years. And then something similar happened, I decided to continue for another 5. And my agent and I have a joke that there is a parallel universe in which I am still doing the research and the conversations.
Sorry, Karan, is the next book desperately seeking Arjun Khan?
No. The next book is about Indian middle-aged men. It's called, we'll talk about that later. But the thing that I will say though, so yes, trajectories change. But the one thing, though, Chandni, is very common, and I think it's very important for everyone here to acknowledge. Each of these women, typically when we talk about women's stories in India, you have this sort of like the dichotomy, right? The dichotomy is either we always write about women as victims, or we write about women as heroes, so you're like big CEOs, champions, all of that. But most of us, we're all in the middle, right? I mean, that. And I was very tired of the fact, I used to call it the missing middle of the narrative when it came to women. I just felt that those stories were just never being told, and not being told very well, I felt. I mean, fiction does a better job, but not in non-fiction. And what I really wanted to do was take all these women who were in the middle, and for them the most important thing was not being, a CEO or a boss or any of that. They wanted to be loved for the work that they were doing at home. They wanted to be acknowledged for all the care, and it is really hard work. Each one of us knows this here, hard work of care. They acknowledged for it. All of them wanted very simple freedoms, that if they want to watch their favorite actor, they should not have to beg, borrow, steal for it. They should just have their own money, their own safe spaces to be able to just have fun. And it sounds very simple, but you realize that these are really, really tough battles for so many women in our country. And so all these women, they're very different, the trajectories are very different. But the one thing that is common amongst all of them, and I think that's, actually you asked me about the title, that's why it's Desperately Seeking Shah Rukh. None of these women are seeking some idealized romantic hero. They're too smart for that. All of them do want, though, they're seeking the economic freedom, the money, the purchasing power, the respect and dignity that they feel they should be afforded in our society. And many of them are really hustling and struggling for it. And that's what they're seeking. And Shah Rukh is just a metaphor to talk about that. And so the trajectories are very different, but I think what I'm very proud to say, and you read the book, each one of these women, when I started interviewing them in 2006, 2007, that period, they were really struggling. It wasn't very clear whether they would be able to watch their favorite actor, whether they would have the freedoms to do so. I'm very happy to say by the time the book is over, 2020, 2021, these are not their struggles. Their struggles have changed. So things have really improved, and they work very hard to make sure that they can stand on their own 2 feet. And it's a long intergenerational battle, and even for women who struggle, their daughters are very different, right? Because then they sort of raise them very differently, their boys are very different. And so I just wanted to give this slice of life glimpse into what's happening to people's homes, and particularly women's lives within these homes, but to do it through rigorous research. And so that's
Wonderful. Also, I can't help but notice there's a very common theme that runs through all the women, which is that of shame. No matter where they are placed in the social hierarchy, there's always an element of shame that's present in a woman's life. There's mom guilt, there's wife guilt, there's daughter guilt, there's I don't know, God knows how many guilts that we live with every day. And you spoke about the dichotomy of women, taken from there actually. Women are in a way expected to be prime caregivers and nurturers, but also they won't warrant the same respect that a man does when he goes out and gets bread to table, right? So which I feel is, and you rightly said that for women, freedom does not mean that they don't seek any rebellion. What they seek is basic dignity. And when we talk about equality, we don't talk about comparison by any sorts. We talk about access to equal dignity in our own houses, in our safe spaces, in the society where we move. And while I was reading your book, I was so happy because the representation of women is not reductive to what we see in fiction. In fiction, the representation of modern women is basically 4 women on a girl's trip, smoking, drinking. That's not what women are seeking. That's not our idea of freedom, and that's not our idea of independence. So I like the fact that I don't want to deal with the characters, but there's this character called Gold, who's an in-flight attendant. And she doesn't drink, she doesn't smoke, she's very particular about her eating habits, she's very particular about her nutrition, she has fierce boundaries. And it's just wonderful to see that honest representation. I think it's also because it's non-fiction, it's not fiction in a way. Out of all these women, is there any particular story that stood out to you or was very close to your heart?
So I want to actually tackle this question of shame, and I'll give you my own example through the release of this book. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but Indian non-fiction, and I study this stuff, often it's written by men. It's read largely by men. There's a statistic recently, I just put this together for my next book. 80% of the books being written in this genre are largely written by men. 70% of the awards are given, the judges and juries are all men. And they're very nice men, this is not, but it is a point of view, right? Let's also acknowledge it, right? And what was interesting was when this book came out, it has a Nobel laureate who is blurbing the book. Professor Abhijit Banerjee he's endorsed the book. It's very kind blurb. But because it's a woman writing the book, plus there's Shah Rukh Khan on the cover, immediately everybody thought, oh, this must be erotic fan fiction or a celebrity book or something incredibly silly and stupid. And I remember the amount of shame actually I had to sort of deal with in being honest, because I did not want to put out a book. So many people told me, and I have economist friends and I have very dear friends, they said to me, oh, it will be taken more seriously if you just drop Shah Rukh Khan, don't talk about women's personal lives, and write it in the way, very old school male economists always write. Like, write it the way Raghuram Rajan would write a book, right? And I'm a big fan of Professor Rajan's. But I decided, no, this, it had to be written, precisely for all the reasons we're talking about, it had to be written in a more feminine language. I wanted to feminize the language of economics. It can be done, and it can be made more lighter, more humorous, more accessible. I kept thinking about my grandmother, and in Bengal, many of us end up becoming economists, and she used to always joke that why is it that all you economists write these books that you write about us, but people like me can never understand what you're actually saying. Plus, she was one of these women who'd been taught to be very afraid of numbers, who'd been taught to be very afraid of finance, of economics. She thought this was, very scary stuff. And I kept thinking of her, honestly, and I kept thinking I wanted the book's writing to convey economics, but to convey it to people who have forever been very scared of that word, who've been told humanities is much more what, women should study and think about. And I wanted it to be very accessible. So I had to deal with a lot of shame. I mean, just to your point, I actually, with Desperately Seeking Shah Rukh myself, had to deal with a lot of this nonsense. And I'm happy, I mean, it landed eventually, and I think the message of what the book was about has reached people. I think you asked me about which woman,
Which life trajectory did you, was the closest to your heart while you were documenting?
So tough. No, I love all of them, but I'll tell you a funny story. One of the first people, in fact, the first woman who I met in Bapunagar, who I started this conversation mentioning, she was a single woman. Her husband had abandoned her, and it was an abusive marriage. And she really struggled to just live on her own. And she had a young daughter who I also used to meet, and I've now known the daughter. When I met her, she was about 8 or 10, and then she's in her early 20s now. I've seen this girl grow up. And she is, now she won't get married, she wants to marry for love. She's working on her own. And what was fascinating in her instance is that her mother, I always used to notice this, her mother always wanted to marry Shah Rukh Khan, to use that, she wanted this very handsome, romantic guy who'd take care of her and all of that. The daughter is not, she wants to be Shah Rukh Khan. That's the difference. She wants his economic freedom, she wants to be as loved as he is. She's not interested in some soppy romantic ideal, she's a very pragmatic young woman. And I think seeing that intergenerational shift, I think wherever I saw mother-daughter pairs, that really has moved me the most. And there are a few mother-daughter pairs like this in the book I've had the privilege of knowing and following for a very long period of time. And you see these very subtle shifts. And we look, right, and as economists, we always look at numbers, and the numbers can be quite depressing sometimes when it comes to women in the Indian economy. I mean, we are right now in the bottom 5 of the world when it comes to women's economic participation. But there are all these stories that are hidden within those numbers as well, right? These glimmers of hope. And there is a lot of optimism, and there's a lot of change. And I think you see that. So I think for me, it would be the mother-daughter pairs. Because you can see the subtle shifts that are happening between the two.
Also, one thing that I wanted to ask you is that while you were talking to these people and you were discussing Shah Rukh Khan, who happens to be their favorite star, he happens to be my favorite star also.
You have the best taste.
Thank you. So, what I want to ask you is that do you think at some level there was also an iota of self-projection while they were talking about him? Because they all had a different perception of him, right? They've all liked him in different roles, they've all liked him for different reasons. And the story of the mother-daughter that you just gave us, so the mother wanted a romantic partner like Shah Rukh, and the daughter wanted an economic independence like Shah Rukh. So was it also self-projection? Was that the theme that you noticed through?
Absolutely. This idea that I think particularly celebrity journalism keeps telling us this icon is this one icon, and everybody sees this icon exactly the same way. That's rubbish. I mean, one thing you realize in the book is people completely view Mr. Khan based on what their experiences are. So for example, if you're a young woman who's the first woman in her family to study, to work, for her, he is much more a self-help guru. She's not interested in him with the arms wide open. In fact, I know so many women, they basically keep looking at his interviews and noting down, and there's a lot of mention of this, noting down things he says about his professional journey. Because he's very open, he's one of the first few celebrities in our culture who is very open about his professional challenges, things that have worked, things that have not worked. And women women were actually drawing from that. So he was not a hero, he was just a self-help guru. There are others for whom he is actually just comfort. They just like seeing him sing and song and dance and do the arms wide open. It gives them a lot of happiness. It's art for them. So everybody watches him very differently. And I think what's interesting is, and I say this in the book, which is, you know, our fantasies reveal our realities. And when so many of these women are fantasizing about a certain idea of Mr. Khan, it's actually not so much him that they are talking about, they're talking about themselves. And they're talking about, and you know, I always say, as real men disappoint, he is going to become even more iconic because you just project so much of that onto him. And you know, I'll give you a simple example. You know, when Pathaan came out, and this came out after the book, I remember I was talking to somebody and I said, oh, you know, he's doing action films now, that's so different. And she's one of the women I followed in the book. And she said to me, and this is a woman who works in the Indian government, and you can understand how difficult it is, it's a tough job. And she turned to me and she said, but you know, I don't think any Indian man would be comfortable with a boss like Dimple Kapadia. You know, just having a woman boss, being okay with it, they would be very uncomfortable. But see, that's projection as well, right? Because she's essentially projecting her own work dynamics onto this particular situation. I mean, it's her individual experience. So yes, absolutely. I don't think there is this one monolithic idea of him. I think people view him very differently. A rural woman with barely any access to media views him very differently than, say, an urban woman who's dealing with difficult workplaces.
And people love him for different reasons. Some love him for the roles he does, some love him for the family man he is. So there are different reasons to that. But also I think we can't discount the fact that stars, especially in our country, they do have the power of moral transformation at some level. Like they do drive that change. And also while I was reading your book, there's this scene where there's a woman who's very upset about the way she's broken up, right? And her idea of the perfect lover comes from Shah Rukh. So do you think at any point the choices that these women have made in their waking life was affected by the star that they so desired or loved?
You know, I'm reluctant to say that, and I've actually said this. In fact, you know, I used to ask all these women, right, when do you watch him, and when did you watch him last year? One of the things they always told me was they'd watch him when they felt very lonely, when they felt they wanted escape from their real lives, when they felt rejected, when they felt stymied in some way, when they wanted escape. And so I'm not going to say he has triggered change. I think these women have triggered change in their own lives, but I think all of us know when we do things that are very different from the traditional path, there is loneliness in that. Each one of us has probably dealt with it in our own ways. If you want to parent differently, if you just want to do things differently, right? And there's so many women, almost all the women in the book I think are deviating from some form of tradition. Not in loud, flashy, obvious ways, but I think in very subtle, I think very meaningful ways. And I think for a lot of them there is loneliness. They don't feel supported by their families. They don't feel loved in those decisions. In economics, we call it an emotional tax. The idea is that when you do something that is not expected of you in the economy or in society, we'll tax you, but we won't tax you in money, we'll tax you in feelings. We'll make you feel a bit lonely, a bit down on yourself, feel a bit insecure, second guess yourself, right? And so I think in that world, they are looking at him when they're feeling low, and they just need that escape, and he sort of, you know, offers some kind of comfort. People do this with music, people can do this with watching football. The women I follow do this watching Shah Rukh Khan, so that's what unites them. So I think to me it's not so much him who has triggered this. I'm very reluctant to say that. I think it's very much the fact that they turn to him when they have made very difficult decisions in their own lives and they just need comfort and escape and entertainment. Yeah.
Perfect. Also, you've met Shah Rukh. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I think I can discuss this question for the next half an hour. But if you could,
how many fans here? We should ask. Yeah. Okay. So. You have forum here. I think.
Yeah. So we are safe to discuss Shah Rukh then. So if you could just highlight the few key points of your meeting, like how was he like, and what is your perception of Shah Rukh? Like, I love him for his interviews. My perception of him is the perfect. His persona is very different from the archetypical alpha male persona that usually is idealized in our society, and he, I think, is a very unconventional alpha male in his own right, and that is something that I like about him, his assuredness, in the sensitivity that he brings forth is something that I take away and I like him for, and his wit, of course, there's no going back from that. So what was your perception of him when you met him, and how was it like?
So firstly, I have to tell you, I had no idea that, I mean, this was not, so, you know, his name and his picture is on the cover of the book, so you have to let his management know because legally you're required to tell them. So we had done that, what my publishers had done at the time the book was coming out, and that was it. I had no expectations. But the book won its first prize. It was the Times of India prize. And I think there were some people, I'm not sure, people who sort of knew him who were in the audience. And I thanked him when I won the prize. And I think somebody told him or something, because almost within the next 2 or 3 weeks, I got a message from his manager saying, if you're in Bombay, come give us the book. And I thought, I'll tell you this, I thought that when she said us, she meant her. You know, us being her and the team. I had no idea that I was walking into, like, he was going to be there. So I think I deserve another prize for just not fainting when that happened. I'm very pleased that I somehow managed to maintain composure. But you know, the thing that is amazing, I mean, all the things that you say, you know, and I mentioned this so much in the book, which is this very different, vulnerable masculinity, and masculinity that is very comfortable with tears, with being softer, even in action movies, and even when he's playing a bad guy, there's a kind of vulnerability in it. But the thing that is amazing is I remember I sat down and one of the first things he said to me, it was so clear to him the book was not about him. He knew it, you know, and to be so comfortable with that, right? That, and he wrote a note, it's in the book that you're all going to get, there are lines from that note in the preface. He said, thank you for putting me to some good use. So I stood he's very funny, and he immediately, and he told me, he said, and he knew this whole thing that, you know, everybody must have thought it's like celebrity fiction. But he said, and you know, he's a student of economics himself, and he's very interested in questions. Yes, and he's from my university, and he's very interested in questions about the economy. So he actually had lots of really great questions. And you know, I said this actually when I put up the note that he had, you know, there are parts of it I will keep private to myself forever. But there were a few parts that I did want to share with the world, and one of the things I did say is that they always tell you should never meet your heroes, but whoever wrote that never met Shah Rukh Khan. I mean, if Shah Rukh Khan is your hero, you must meet him. He's an incredibly kind, generous human being, and he's been so kind to the book and many of the women involved in the book. And yeah, I wish him all success, and I did put him to good use, and I can claim that.
We all agree to that. Also, there are so many women in the book that you've mentioned, and you followed their trajectory for like 15 years. So are there parts that you left out because of personal reasons or because they didn't want to be in the book?
Yes. I didn't answer that question. We were talking about ethical protocols. So originally I was following 15 women. 2 dropped out. 2 because of some questions about what they wanted in the book and what I wanted to write. So we agreed we wouldn't do it. So eventually it became, I mean, it's 10, but it's actually 11 because one of them is the daughter of one of the women I follow. So yes, so there were nearly 4 people who, in one way or the other, a young woman from a Rajput community who has an arranged marriage. She's not very happy with, and you can read about her, and she wanted to study philosophy, and she has to sort of struggle with her academic aspirations and her marriage. But other than that, I think the way I handled it was, there were 4 people who eventually didn't work out, and then for many who were so concerned, I just converted it into a composite, and I'm very transparent about that in the way it's written.
Also, I think I was reading it somewhere that in India, it's only, was it in your book, I don't remember, that only 20% of women own the wealth. So which is quite a disparity.
Yeah, so there are 2, if you walk away from here not remembering anything, but I please request you just remember 2 things. Very important. Remember I mentioned bottom 5 when it comes to women's economic freedoms, and it doesn't matter, all people across all political, social spectrums, everybody acknowledges this is a problem. And this is a big problem that's confronting our country, I think the future of our country, so that's one. The other thing that's really important, and I think that holds in 20%, right now we've seen a slight increase in women's workforce participation in the past 6 years. A lot of economists say if you start to unpack it, you realize it's a lot of women who are working, supporting their family businesses, it's getting picked up, so that's really what's increasing it. And there are questions about the quality of that employment, so that's a whole story, and I describe some of it in the book. So let's see where that goes. I'm hopeful. But the other statistic I want all of you to remember is not only are we in the bottom 5 when it comes to women's workforce participation, we are in the bottom 5 when it comes to men helping in housework. So we measure this. We measure time use. This is done globally. The Indian government puts out a time poverty statistic, and the numbers are quite abysmal. We are in the bottom 5 with, I think, South Korea, and it's us, and there are a few other countries. So I think
Yemen and Iraq, I think.
Iraq,
Pakistan,
Yemen, and
Yemen,
Pakistan,
Iraq.
yeah. It's not. I mean, we should not. I mean, being in the bottom 5 with a statistic like this, I think, is something I think all of us can work together to remedy. And so I would urge all the men here. It's nice to see you here because often all my events are all female. But I would urge all of you, your sons, your brothers, whoever else, go spend 10 minutes in the kitchen. You'll push up the government statistics certainly that are being measured. So yeah, I think those two things are important. So it's not just wealth. I mean, it's time, it's access to opportunity.
It's also healthcare. That's also quite another conversation for that. But what's your next book about? If we can just talk about that a bit.
Yeah, it's going to be called The Tyranny of the Indian Uncle. It's about, for the Shah Rukh Khan book I followed, for Desperate Singh Shah Rukh, I followed women in their 30s, right? Like, so from late 20s till their mid 30s, 15 years of their lives. This time I'm following men in their 50s. So it's, and they're from very different, much like the Desperate Seeking Shah Rukh, it's men from very different backgrounds. I'm very curious about what, because I'm one of those people, I hate this kind of making feminism a fight between men and women. It is not. It is actually something that is beneficial for everybody. And I think the only way you can then do that is also really understand what has it been like for men in the country in the past, and so much has changed, right? And I keep hearing, everywhere I went and I interviewed women, I keep hearing the men say, "You want to talk to me as well? How come you're not interested in listening to me?" And so I had decided at that point that I was going to do this book. And there are actually excerpts, if anybody's interested. Mint Lounge has been publishing excerpts. I use it as a commitment device so that I will make sure I publish it. So Mint Lounge, if you just Google Tyranny of the Indian Uncle, it will come up. It's available. Thank you, yes. Yes, because the thing that I wanted to actually, because when you say, it's become a bit of a pejorative term sometimes, right? Like people say, but I actually wanted to say that a lot of these men, at least in early days of my research, I'm only into 4 years, I have 6 more years to go, and I have to finish. It's their 50s, they have to go from 50 to 60. One of the things I actually realized is for so many of these men, they are living under the tyrannies of their own families and their own culture. It's not, it's very easy to sort of look and then just criticize, but I think when you sort of start to realize what's been navigating and guiding their behaviors, you start to realize that the tyranny is also on ourselves, right? We are tyrannical to ourselves, exactly. And so it's an interesting exercise. That's what it's called, and it'll take me a good 6 more years.
Wonderful. Can't wait to read that and can't wait to host you with that one.
Thank you.
And with that, I think we'll culminate the conversation and I'll open it up to all of you. I'm sure you're brimming with questions, and so over to you.
And today we've been started a book, and how did it all happen? And you've given us a lot of reasons to be jealous of you. Going inside the lives of the people, of the women, and exploring that emotion, that love for Shah Rukh, and being a part of it, kind of, for 15 years. I think that's too much.
Thank you. Earlier, I have always been a fan. Now, sometimes I joke that I'm his professional fan. Everyone is I followed, interact with him in his films and his music and all of that. I started to realize that he means very different things to people, and I think he's become. I love him certainly more, but I love him a lot more because of what I have seen him do for other people, the comfort that he has provided to all these people. And I think to me, it's not so much about his movies or his celebrity anymore. Now, I say this all the time. I can't divorce him now from the stories that all these women have shared with me. So when I see him, I don't actually see him. I mean, and he knows this. I don't just see him. I see this young girl who has saved 3 months of her hard-earned work, making, doing Patni Ka Kaam at home, just so that she can go to Bareilly and once get a CD and watch him, right? To me, that is what now when I see him, that's the image that is immediately conjured up. It's not a celebrity anymore. He's very different. He's become a sociological kind of construct for me, so it's different.
What I meant was, yet you didn't love him so much, yet you wanted to write a book.
No, I said I'm a fan. I said I agree. And I also don't think love can be quantified.
I just want to know, like, besides Shahrukh, there may be other vision in their mind. You know, this is not only the Shahrukh is the only person, like, as a celebrity status. The women see them as an inspiration, and n number of men as celebrities or maybe women. So who all were the other that you have
So, you
come
know,
across?
it's such an interesting question, and it's actually something I get into towards the latter part of the book. You remember I was telling you there are all these mother-daughter pairs in the book? What's fascinating is the mothers will love Shah Rukh. He does have a pull. I mean, when it comes to women, at least everywhere. I've gone from Kerala to Jharkhand to, I mean, it's remarkable. I mean, I think he can just unite women in a way that's quite remarkable. But the daughters, they love Deepika Padukone. They love Indian cricket. You know, now women in cricket. They love Mary Kom. They will mention Priyanka Chopra. Some of them are obsessed with Priyanka Chopra's Instagram, and they don't have a phone, so they'll borrow. And I actually talk about this. One of the women I followed is a part-time domestic worker, living out of a slum in Delhi. Her daughter is the first person. She's worked very hard to put her daughter into school. Her daughter reads and can speak English with some amount of comfort. She doesn't have a phone. She's not allowed one because they're a bit scared of giving her one. She borrows her brother's phone for 10 minutes every weekend, only so she can scroll through what Priyanka and Deepika are up to on their Instagram. And you know, I actually do say that I think while he represents that, you know, benevolent patriarch fantasy, I think of the generation before, I think for many of the younger girls now, for them, they actually want to see women who are as actuated. You know, they don't.
They idealize the young actresses, and they have in the subconscious mind they want to be like them. They want to copy them. They maybe.
Well, I don't know about copy. You know, for example, one of the things I'll tell you something that this young woman I was telling her who borrows the phone from her brother for 10 minutes. She said to me about Priyanka Chopra. It stayed with me. I mentioned this in the book. She said, well, no wonder she had to marry a foreigner because no Indian man would be happy with a girl who's that successful. Now, I mean, I disagree with her, but the thing is that, you know, this is the way they are thinking of. So it's not so much that she wants to be her, but they are seeing their freedoms, right? That suddenly you have this generation of women who are so open about the fact that they want to earn money on their own. They also want supportive partners. Some of them are very open about relationships that have not worked out in a very public way, and that's very unusual. You know, earlier we try and hide all that, right? So I think a lot of these women look at that, and they think that there's something aspirational in that level of being free, in a way.
That's
right?
fantasize their freedom.
Little bit. But there's also, I want to also say sports stars now. It's remarkable. I mean, I keep going back to many of these places because I just, you know, I want to follow what's happening. You really now see, you know, with the cricket team, so many people will mention, young girls will mention women in sports, which is wonderful. And so I do think it's shifted a lot. I still think he has a pull, which it's really remarkable. I think it'll take, you know, many people many years to understand what it is. But yeah, I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
It was really nice hearing from you. So compiling everything that you've shared right now, definitely after the journey where you saw a shift. So where your book said about, the first book said about women and your second book will be talking about men in their 50s. As an economist, has there been anything that you compiled that what can be done to bring that shift in that percentage? Because kahin na kahin, I'm sure we need to unlearn the values that we were coming up with and bring in something new. Because when you said Priyanka Chopra and then you say Shah Rukh Khan, one thing common with both of them as an individual is the strength and the personality that actually brings in. And we are no more the girls of the Disney characters.
Yeah. It's not a fairy tale.
Yes, and neither men are those white horse men coming around. So what, as an economist, I would like if you have any lessons or examples to share? कि what can be done to bring that change?
Asking me for my 9 to 5 job. This is what I do regularly. And so I'm more than happy to talk about this. So there are 3 big things that are happening to women in the economy, and the book has all the data and all the theories on this. One is, it's not good enough just to say, oh, there is this issue about women just don't have time between managing care at home and work outside. One of the things we can certainly do is improve regulation and access to childcare for all women. So we've had a really good change in the Maternity Benefit Act. It's opened up, it's increased, but it only still caters to women in the formal economy, right? Most women who are in the informal economy are completely out of the net. And I think there needs to be a very structural, serious thinking about how do you make sure credibly, it's not just announce a scheme, but actually think very carefully about how do you make sure that childcare is accessible, of high quality, and is available to everybody. So that's one. The second thing we know is that it's not just the fact that women want jobs. The government surveys asked this time, they asked, do you want to work? And so many women will say, yes, we want to work. And nearly 47% of urban women said, if our care concerns were better addressed, we would be out there working, right? So I think that's why it's important. But the other part of it is that, remember, India grew economically significantly, but only 19% of jobs in the fastest growing sectors, the top 10 fastest growing sectors, have gone to women. So we have a serious problem about who is hiring, how many women. I mean, people keep asking me, what's the solution? I keep saying the solution is hire more women, period. I mean, just hire people who are different from you. And so I think thinking a little bit about incentives to employers as well. Many states are trying this. This has happened, by the way, in Southeast Asia. So they used to give small incentives as tax rebates or incentives to entrepreneurs or employers, saying if you have, say, above 15% of your payroll is women, you get a bit of a tax break, right? There are interesting things that can be thought about as an incentive. And it doesn't need to stay forever, but till you can push up, perhaps, women's presence in certain sectors, which could be strategic. And then after that, you have a sunset clause, right? So that's the second thing, which is incentives to employers. The third, which is very dear to my heart, and I think it's very important, is, jobs in India, and this is true globally, jobs in India are not available everywhere. Jobs are clustered in certain cities, in certain places. What that means is if you want to access a high-paying job or a good quality job, you have to move. As a single woman who is extremely privileged, I can tell you, it is a nightmare to try and do something as simple as find a house for yourself which is safe. And I think all of us know what that involves. And I think unless government really doesn't get its act together along with the private sector to provide credible, safe, proper housing, these numbers will just not shift. I mean, right now people talk about transport vouchers, great. But if the housing situation is not solved, where are you actually using these vouchers to go to, right? And so I think the third issue is the housing market. And the housing market for single women, be it when they're studying, I think it's still better as students, and it's becoming better, but also when it comes to women who are working. And right now you hear these really nightmarish stories coming out of even Tamil Nadu, which is one of the states where there's so many women working in garment zones. But what's really frightening is it's often this kind of placement agent and you're living in squalor, essentially. And many women, and I don't blame them, why would these women say, I want to continue working in that kind of environment? Then you're much better off perhaps being out of the workforce because you feel perhaps it's safer for you. So I think to me, these three things are sort of top priorities in terms of policy. This is not new. This is something, as I said, across political spectrums, across the world, people are talking about these things. I just think that now perhaps it just needs a bit more of a push.
Like we spoke about women, and next, as we were coming up with men, definitely the world talks a lot about women. But just say you mentioned the book, no one talks about men and the problems or the hurdles men go through. Because I suppose a very basic example, so it's the men who sandwich between two women in the family. And eventually the one who's not the blood relation gets sandwiched more. Isn't it? So I think my next book come out and then we come back. So I'm not asking the question, but I'm definitely looking for those answers in your next book.
I will say, I'll just say to you, yes, but it's a bit of a mixed bag. We'll talk about it more.
Yeah, I'm looking for the answers in the next book.
I wanted to ask, like you were talking about the fact that statistically, like women would get more childcare, better benefits for childcare, they'll be able to go out more often and work. So I was reading this somewhere in Japan, what they're doing is that when couples get married, they give them better incentives, and a lot of women, working women with great salaries, and maybe they're in very, very good places, positions in the companies. What they do is they take a backseat and they retire, kind of retire, take an early retirement for raising their children, and then in turn what happens is that the Japanese government is giving them much better incentives. So, and I believe that even Korea is trying to debate on this topic because of the population problems that they are facing, both these countries. So do you think that if the government over here starts doing this, that, you know,
I think a couple of things. Look, I don't think the point of well-being is to say that everybody has to be earning an income. I mean, let's be, Claudia Goldin recently just won the Nobel, and she's one of the first few women to be tenured in the Harvard economics department. And one of the reasons she won the Nobel, she essentially said what really shifted the needle when it came to women's voice in America wasn't just the increase in women's labor force participation. It was actually what she calls the horizon effect, and what that means, it's actually very similar to what these women that we're talking about in the Shah Rukh book is. In their horizons, the idea that your professional identity is a very important part of who you are is a very critical thing. And she sees this big shift, and she actually says what really changed the dynamic, for good and for bad. I mean, that's an open call and people discuss it. What really changed things in Europe and the US and even China and even certainly countries like South Korea, where in fact now the current government is sort of reacting to all the shifts, right? Is that suddenly you had a generation of young women who said, well, for us, yes, marriage, and we really want to be nurturers and caregivers, but there are other things that are also very important to me in my personhood. And that's a very personal call, right? So I really always, and I'm very honest about this in the book, I'm very reluctant to get into this, let me sit here and judge someone for the personal choices and trade-offs that they're making. It's hard enough being a person. What I will say though is, I often joke about this, which is imagine a world in India where it was actually safe for girls to live on their own. Think about how many marriages would there be, how many marriages would there not be. Think about who would be doing what, right? If women could just genuinely own property in very clear ways, have access to housing in very clear, safe ways. And so, to me, I think it's always this very subtle trade-off, right? So, yes, there can be incentives, and even with those incentives, many women may choose because they genuinely find joy in being mothers. And I think that's wonderful. That's a choice, and it's really hard work. I just wish that hard work were better remunerated and acknowledged, right? But the reverse is also true, which is, for many women, if they had safe housing, they may leave abusive marriages, and perhaps that's a good thing, right? So I think I think we have to always remember, especially in a country as large as ours, there's always the exception to the rule and the rule to the exception. But in general, I do think a lot more needs to be done to make markets friendlier for women, and all kinds of markets. And till we don't do that, we will just keep struggling with this. I think we'll have a generation of women who just constantly struggle to be self-actuated. And I think that's important.
It's also safe transportation, safe roads, everything around. A safe society is a must for realizing their dreams. And the book must be a must read for the boys. Their mind
must read for the boys. Thank you.
Tourism Guild of Agra, which is the umbrella organization under which comes star-rated hotels, travel agents, and business related to travel industry. Sir, I would request you to please come forward and present a moment. So first of all, on behalf of Prabha Ketan Foundation and Ehsaas Women of Agra, I would like to thank our hospitality partner ITC Mughal and media partner Dainik Jagran. Shania, on behalf of everyone here today, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you for an absolutely eye-opening and thought-provoking conversation. Your insights into the lives of Indian women, the stories you've shared, and the depth with which you've explored their experiences have left us all truly enlightened. In the span of our discussion, you've not only opened our eyes to the realities faced by Indian women, but also painted vivid portraits of resilience, strength, and the myriad of emotions that shape their lives. I'm sure everyone here is so looking forward to grab their copies, and dive into its pages. But before that, I want to thank all of you for making it on a Sunday, which is a day meant for relaxation and leisure. Your presence here today means a lot to all of us. Now I would request you all to go ahead, take your copies, and please get it signed by Shunaya. Thank you very much.
सब कोई पूजत पार्वती नाथ, सब कोई पूजत छवि प्रकाशित चौमुख ज्वाला, छवि प्रकाशित चौमुख ज्वाला। महादेव शंभो शिव शंकर, महादेव शंभो शिव शंकर। शरण आवत तुम्हारे अभयंकर, शरण आवत तुम्हारे अभयंकर। जय गिरिजा